Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. With the release of AQ coming out shortly on these anniversary realms, I wanted to make a few videos talking about tanking twin emps because I don't want people to show up to the raid unprepared. This video is going to be covering talents. I'll have follow-up videos talking about gear and strategy, but this video is just talking about talents. You are probably already rating as either like SM Ruin or DS Ruin for just normal rating. So in this video I'm going to be talking about those specs, whether they're viable or not, and I'm also going to be talking about some other specs that are tailored specifically to taking this fight. Most guilds will utilize a Warlock tank to tank Emperor Veclor because he is immune to physical damage, and Warlocks have the highest threat per second as a rule for casters, and also are more survivable than like mages and priests for the most part. So that's the reason you're going to be tanking Twin Emperors potentially. But let's not ramble on too much. Let's kind of just get into the video. So when tanking, you really have two goals, and that is to maintain threat and to stay alive. To maintain threat, you're going to be spamming Searing Pain because it's your highest threat per second ability. And as far as the stats that help with that, it's pretty much just the same stats that help with DPS. You want as close to hit cap as possible, you want high crit, you want spell power, and percent damage. Notice that a talent like Shadow Mastery for like SM Ruin will not be very useful because that's percent shadow damage. You're either going to want percent fire damage or just percent damage, all kinds of damage, like Soul Link, right? And then mitigation, another very important thing. You don't want to die and potentially wipe the raid. So for mitigation, you're going to want high stamina and shadow resistance. And I'm going to go into more in depth about threat and mitigation in my next video talking about gear, because like stamina isn't really like, you have one talent for stamina bit. Like I said, I'm going to go in more in depth in that stuff in my next video, but I just wanted to mention because it's important for the talents, because there's talent builds that focus more on threat and there's talent builds that focus more on mitigation, and you kind of want to have a mix between the two. Both very important. But first, before we get into the specialty specs that are really for tanking Twin Emperors, let's just talk about the specs that you're probably already familiar with. So first is an example screenshot of SM Ruin. A couple points can be moved around based on preference or whatever, but this is the idea. The spec is named after Shadow Mastery here in Affliction, and then Ruin over here in Destruction. I circled the talents that I would say are the most impactful for tanking Twin Emperors. That being, with this spec, we have here in Destruction, we have Devastation, giving you 5% crit. One row below that, we have Improved Searing Pain, which gives you 2% crit on Searing Pain specifically per point. So you may have like 2 out of 5 as a SM Ruin Warlock, typically. So that would be 4% crit on Searing Pain. And then Ruin, the namesake of the talent, or half of the namesake for SM Ruin. This giving you the double bonus damage on crits. Three pretty nice talents for threat for tanking Twin Emps. These three right here. But since you're spamming Searing Pain for this fight, all these talents in Affliction really aren't doing much for you at all. None of these are really impactful at all. So this is by far the worst spec for tanking Twin Emperors. Can you get away with it? Yeah, probably. But if you want to be optimal, I would stray away from this spec. Let's talk about the next spec, right? So this is DS Ruin. This is a much better build for tanking Twin Emperors, and it's just a normal PvE build that most Warlocks play. I would say this spec is even more popular than SM Ruin as a rule. But what do you have for taking Twin Emperors in this spec? So you still have the same things in Destruction. You still have Devastation, 5% crit, 2 out of 5 improved Searing Pain, 4% crit, and you have Ruin, the double bonus damage on crits. But instead of all these affliction talents that you're getting to try to get down to Shadow Mastery with SM Ruin, that don't really do much for you for Searing Pain, you're going into Demonology instead, going down to Demonic Sacrifice. And I would say there's two really notable talents in this tree that really help you out. Being the first one right here, Demonic Embrace. This gives you 15% stamina at the cost of 5% spirit, but 15% stamina is really nice. And it scales with gear and world buffs and all that, so this will really help with your mitigation, or survivability to be more specific. And then we have Demonic Sacrifice. Typically, with this spec, you're sacrificing Succubus to get 15% shadow damage, because usually you're like spamming Shadow Bolt. However, with this spec, you will, or when taking Twin Emperors with this spec, you will be sacrificing your Imp instead to gain 15% fire damage. So this spec, DS Ruin, when compared to SM Ruin, is strictly better for taking Twin Emperors in that you gain 15% stamina and 15% fire damage from Demonic Sacrifice and Demonic Embrace when compared to SM Ruin. So it's just strictly better. This is a much more passable spec for tanking Twin Emperors. However, this is not ideal, because these two specs are like your just typical rating specs. But now let's talk about two other specs that are really tailored to specifically tanking Twin Emperors. So first, let's talk about DS Emberstorm. So this is similar to DS Ruin in that you have the same talents in Demonology. You still get Demonic Embrace for 15% stamina. You still get Demonic Sacrifice for 15% fire damage. But now let's look over to Destruction. You'll notice that we still have Devastation. We still have Ruin. But Improved Searing Pain, with this spec, we're able to max it out easily, 5 out of 5. Whereas with the traditional Warlock specs, you either don't have anything in here or you only have like 2 out of 5. So that's an additional 6% crit when compared to DS Ruin. You see over here, 5 out of 5 Improved Searing Pain is 10% crit instead of that 4%. And then we also are able to go all the way down to Emberstorm, which is the fire counterpart to the Shadow Mastery that SM Ruin Warlocks are familiar with. So that's an additional 10% fire damage. So with this spec, when compared to DS Ruin, when compared to DS Ruin, we get an additional 6% crit on Searing Pain, which is what we're spamming, and an additional 10% fire damage. So this is the highest threat per second, the most threat build you're going to get for taking Twin Emperors, this DS Emberstorm. As a Warlock spamming Searing Pain playing DS Emberstorm, any other caster is going to be really hard pressed to try to rip threat off you. The only reason they may be able to just because you're wearing shadow resistance gear, but still, a Warlock spamming Searing Pain with all these crit and percent fire damage talents and Ruin and all that, you should not have to have your casters hold back at all. They should be able to pump as much as possible with this spec, just because you're really going heavy into these fire talents to help you through threat. But now let's talk about a different build, and that would be a Soul Link build that is tailored toward taking Twin Emperors. So what are the notable talents here? Well, we have in Demonology, we still have the 15% stamina, and then we have Demonic Sacrifice, but we will not be using it because instead we'll be utilizing this talent here. The penultimate talent is Master Demonologist, and this gives you a different effect based on what pet you have out. And for taking Twin Emperors, you're going to want to have a Fell Hunter out because the effect is 1 shadow resistance per level. So at level 60, this will be a free 60 shadow resistance. This will really help you not have to wear as much shadow resistance gear. You can gear more towards threat or whatever. And then we have Soul Link, the namesake of the talent build. Now this talent is awesome for taking Twin Emperors. It reduces the damage you take by 30% across the board, in that it will split the damage with your Fell Hunter. So if you're playing this spec, just make sure your healers aren't one of those healers who have pet names disabled for whatever reason in raid. Make sure they're aware that your Fell Hunter needs some attention as well. However, with how much resistance your Fell Hunter has, and with it just being like 30%, your Fell Hunter is not going to be too difficult to keep up. Just a few hots or just keeping an eye on it should be enough to keep your Fell Hunter alive, utilizing that Soul Link to really reduce the amount of damage you take. And then Soul Link also is a little bit of a threat talent because it gives you 3% damage across the board. So, very, very nice talent, Soul Link. Paired with Master Demonologist, super, super survivable, helping with your survivability with these. 30% less damage and 60 shadow resistance. But you'll notice we're not able to get nearly as much in Destruction. We are still able to get Devastation for 5% crit, and we're able to get Improved Serum Pain almost maxed out, 4 out of 5. I suppose you could take the point out of Shadow Burn to make it 5 out of 5, but I do like having the option of that instant cast damage available to me. So I would say this would probably be the way to go. But so we do still get 9% extra crit on our Serum Pain. No, sorry. 5 plus 9. 5 plus 8. I'm sorry. 13%. So we still get a good amount of crit, but we do not get Ruin for the bonus crit damage, and we don't get like Emberstorm for the 10% fire damage, and we're not utilizing Demonic Sacrifice for 15% fire damage. So this spec, while it is much more survivable than DS Emberstorm, it's not nearly as much threat. But now that we've looked at the talents, be it SM Ruin being the worst, DS Ruin being a fair amount better, and then the two talents that are really tailored towards taking Twin Emperors, DS Emberstorm and Soul Link, let's look at the differences between the two optimal talent builds and talk about which one might be better for you. So with Soul Link, when compared to DS Emberstorm, what are we gaining? Well, we get, the notable talents are 30% reduced damage, being split with the pet, and then the Master Demonologist 60 shadow resistance. So that's really tailored towards mitigation. But then if we go with DS Emberstorm, when compared to Soul Link, we gain 22% increased damage, being 15% from Demonic Sacrifice Imp, 10% from Emberstorm, making it 25%, but subtract 3% because you're not getting the 3% damage from Soul Link. So an increased 22% damage, an increased 2% crit on Serum Pain because Soul Link was able to get 4 out of 5, whereas DS Emberstorm can easily get 5 out of 5. And then Ruin, the crit bonus damage. Double bonus damage on crits. So you have to kind of look at these two talent builds and decide what do you think would be better for your guild with the situation you're in. Is it being more survivable and not having to wear as much shadow resistance gear? Or is it you want the big threat? I would say it may be wise to just play Soul Link maybe your first couple clears if you're not super confident in your healers, just because you don't want to be the guy to die and wipe the raid and lose everyone's world buffs and everyone's upset. However, you also don't want to have to be the guy to tell all your casters, look, listen, I'm playing Soul Link for this, so I don't have I'm missing 22% damage and 2% crit and crit bonus damage. So my threat is going to be a lot lower than you might expect. So you're going to have to watch your threat meter and maybe hold off a little bit. as a Warlock, you are a DPS player, typically. So you are probably aware that having to stop DPS because of threat is probably the least fun thing in the world. So it would suck to have your casters relax for a couple seconds, but if you're playing Soul Link, potentially they may have to. Whereas with DS Emberstorm, I can't imagine any mage or boomkin or shadow priest or elemental shaman or whatever really out threat per setting you. Out threat per second. Doing more threat than you. Because all these talents combined really with how Searing Pain works with the threat modifier, I think any caster would be pretty hard pressed to try to pull threat off you. But if you're playing this, keep in mind you're going to have to wear more shadow resistance gear than a Soul Link Warlock would, and you don't have Soul Link. So your healers just have to be prepared. But yeah, that's pretty much the video. My plan, as of this moment, I'm pretty confident in our healers, is to play DS Emberstorm. However, if I feel like I'm dying, I may swap to Soul Link, just to make sure I'm not dying. But yeah, that's the video. The next video is going to be talking about gear, specifically like shadow resistance gear, how much you need, what pieces are good, which ones are traps. But yeah, that's the video. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.